so we are continuing our discussion on Across 5 Aprils. We're on page 49 in your book. And I know it's been a few days because we've been doing testing. And I know that makes everything weird because the last time we had any discussion was a week ago, right? So we kind of got to get our brains back into the story, and I know that's hard. So we'll just do our best. And I'm looking at today and tomorrow. We've got quite a bit left to go, and so I'm looking at it and I'm thinking really maybe Friday or Monday for the test. And the test will cover Across 5 Aprils and Phoebe and the General. So what you may want to do over the weekend is reread both of them. Neither one is terribly long. It's not like they're one page. They're a little bit to read. But you're going to want to reread them because the questions will be over the notes we took at first with the different literary terms like metaphor and coming of age and excerpt and plot and those things. Okay, so there will be questions about that, and there will be questions about the story as well. There will also be vocabulary questions. So when you're reading, Phoebe and the General didn't have any vocabulary words, but Across 5 Aprils has had a lot of vocabulary words. And so you're going to kind of want to keep that in mind as you're reading. Of course, as usual, I'll give you a study guide. So we'll have more specific information a little bit later. Okay, so let's finish up our class. We're going to do about 10 minutes of chatting about Across 5 Aprils. So when we left off, the last question I asked you was, how had Ebb been surviving? And so that's what I want to kind of go back over that, and then we'll go forward. Johnny?
He's been living off the land, like stealing a little bit of food from other people, getting like a rabbit when he could, cooking it over a fire.
Right. So he'd been hunting as best he could. He couldn't really fire his gun because that would attract people. But if he could you can catch a rabbit in a snare sometimes. And so if he caught a rabbit, or eating off the land, berries, fruit. Knowing what plants you can eat and what plants you can't. If you're somebody who is outdoors a lot, that's really helpful to know, like which plants you can eat and which plants you can't. Because some plants, like for instance, did you know that cashews have to be roasted before you can eat them? Otherwise, they're poisonous.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. There are actually some. I think hazelnuts are the same way. Now that I've said that, I'm going to have to go look it up because I don't remember. But there are some things that can kill you if you eat them, right? Like there are certain mushrooms that you shouldn't eat and other mushrooms that you can if you like mushrooms. Some mushrooms are poisonous. Some mushrooms are not, right? So Ebb obviously was a little more in tune with the land and knew kind of what he was doing. But yeah, he had to live off land. And then as Johnny mentioned, there was some stealing happening. There's an interesting Bible verse in the book of Proverbs that asks God to give, basically the writer says, give me just enough money so that not so much that I become proud and forget you, but also not so poor that I would steal and sin, right? Because when you don't have a lot of money, sometimes you run out of options. And people will often make bad decisions when they're hungry.
Hangry.
Well, hangry, right? But, if you're that hungry, genuinely hungry, that you've got to, look through a dumpster for food, right? There are people who do that. They'll go to a dumpster behind a restaurant and eat out of the dumpster because they're that hungry, right? So when you're hungry, sometimes you make bad decisions. And Ebb had to engage in a little bit of stealing to eat. So that's the kind of situation he's in, which kind of gives you then even more insight into this person who wouldn't normally steal, but he's kind of been reduced to that. It gives you some compassion for him, I think. Okay. We also talked about, do you think Ebb would have deserted if Tom had not been killed? And I think most of us agreed that he probably would have been able to carry on. I think that was kind of the class consensus. Am I remembering that right? That you guys all felt like Eb would have been able to carry on if Tom was still there to kind of encourage him. You guys, do we remember talking about that?
Yeah.
At all? It's a Monday, I know. We got to get our brains engaged. Yeah, and we talked about how, everybody needs a friend. Everybody needs somebody they can kind of count on. And for Eb, that was Tom. And then when Tom was gone, his whole support system was gone. And when you're in the middle of a war and it's awful, right? Okay, so let's talk about letters. Now, you guys probably don't get letters very often, right? No, because we have email and we have texting and we have, phone calls. And so it's a lot easier to communicate with people. But back then, telegrams existed. So you could send a telegram, but they were very expensive and they were really only for emergencies. So most people communicated by letter. How do you think a letter from home makes a soldier feel?
Heartwarming.
Heartwarming. If you were away somewhere and you got a letter from home, how would you feel?
Pretty good.
I mean, I guess depending on the letter, right? When I was in college, I went from Texas to Nebraska. It was about 500, 800 miles away from home, something like that. And I didn't go home for I went home for Christmas and I went home for summer. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving and I didn't go home for spring break. It wasn't enough time. And my mom wrote me a letter every week. I got a letter from my mom every single week. She would mail it with my allowance. She sent me $20 and a letter every week when I was in college. And she would write me the most wonderful letters about how everybody was doing in the family and how people in the church were doing. And I mean, she would and I loved them because it made me feel like I had a connection to home still. We do that different ways now, but even so, if you were to get like a handwritten card or letter or note in the mail from somebody, how would you feel now? How would you feel if you went to the mailbox today and there was a note from somebody that you hadn't heard from in a while?
Probably happy.
I'm sorry, what?
Happy.
Louder, Brady.
Happy.
Can't hear you.
Happy.
Happy? Yeah. You would feel pretty good. I have friends who have told me they've kept everything I've ever written them. Because it's so rare nowadays, and it kind of makes you feel good to get something in the mail that's, not a bill or junk mail or political mail right now. Am I right? Getting all those political flyers, crazy stuff. And so mail, there's something special about mail. And when you think about being a soldier and being lonely, like missing your family, yeah, you have you guys in your unit or whatever, and you might make a good friend there, but there's still something lonely and isolated about being out there. And and getting these letters from home were a real, what we call a morale booster. Your morale is how you're feeling. And so when you have a low morale, that means you're feeling a little bit depressed or a little bit down in the dumps. And when your morale is high, that means you're feeling pretty good and you can get things done. So letters from home are actually really important. We often hear at our school, I don't know if you guys maybe participated in this last year, we sent Christmas cards to soldiers that are overseas. Because the church here does that. I think it's actually Michael Lenglis that's in charge of that. But the church here does that. And you might or might not even know that soldier. It's just soldiers that are overseas, and we send them cards for Christmas. Merry Christmas, thank you for your service, we're praying for you, those kinds of things. And it does a lot for their morale. It lifts their spirits. Okay, this is a specific question with a specific one-word answer. Okay. Who made Jethro's lunch for him? Who made Jethro's lunch for him?
His sister.
Who?
His sister.
Not his sister. You're very close.
Nancy?
Nancy, who was Nancy? Brady?
His aunt?
Nope. Johnny was very close when he said sister.
Sister-in-law?
Sister-in-law. Yeah, he was Jethro's sister-in-law, his brother's wife. Now, who are the federal registrars?
Annoying people.
So if you're looking on that page, who are the federal registrars?
Those are people that hunt down deserters.
Yes, they are soldiers.
And bring them back.
Yeah, they're soldiers, and their job is to find deserters and bring them to justice, right? So you're gonna go to court. You're gonna be charged with desertion. You're gonna get in trouble. Okay. Jethro warns Eb that the federal registrars had been looking for him. So the federal registrars had been there, and they had been looking for Eb, and Jethro warns him about that. Now, he could have gotten in trouble for warning him. Jethro could have gotten in a lot of trouble for warning Eb. So why do you think he told him anyway? Why do you think he told him anyway? What was it that that prompted Jethro to tell Eb? I see you. I'm going to let somebody else answer if we can have somebody else answer. It'll be good to hear another voice. It's not a hard question. I mean, if you have somebody you love that's in trouble and you warn them, why do you warn them? Brady, you got to speak up.
Because you have compassion for them.
You have compassion for them?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. You have compassion for them. And why do you think it would be important for Eb to know that? Why is it important for you to know somebody's looking for you?
So, so Eb could know that they were looking for him, so he didn't do anything too dumb.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could be on the lookout for them if they're on the lookout for you, right?
Find them before they find you.
Okay, we're on page 50. Now, this is... I'm going to read just like the last little bit on 49, and then I'm going to read a little bit into 50, and then we're going to talk about that, okay? So, the bottom of 49. Eb, I've got to tell you, Jethro said quietly after a while, the soldiers that call themselves the federal registrars was at the home looking for you last month. Eb seemed to shrink within himself. He looked at his hands carefully, as if he really cared about inspecting them, and his mouth worked in a strange convulsive grimace. He wouldn't look at Jethro when he finally spoke. I was an awful fool. At least you got a chance in battle. Maybe it's 1 in 100, but it's a chance. This way I got none. There's no place on this earth for me to go. Even the camps of deserters don't want fellers as weak and sick as I am. They let me know that quick at Point Prospect. I'll either freeze or starve or be catched. I'd give just about anything if I could walk back to my old outfit and pitch into the fighting again. A soldier don't have to feel ashamed. When Eb says, there's no place on this earth for me to go, what did he mean? What did he mean by that? There's no place for me to go. Johnny?
He's ashamed, and everyone will look down on him and maybe even mock him because he deserted, and he can't go back to the army, and the deserters don't want him because he can't really do anything because he's so weak. Yeah, so the deserters don't want him because he's too weak. He can't go back to the army. Why? What would happen if he goes back to the army, Talon?
Probably be killed.
Yeah, he'll be hanged for desertion. And he can't go home because if he goes home, what'll happen?
Jethro's parents will look down on him.
Well, yeah. And Grace?
He'll get in trouble.
He'll get in trouble. He'll get caught, and the same thing would happen if he
And
goes.
they would get in trouble.
They would get in trouble too, and then he would still get caught, and so things are looking pretty bleak for Eb. Do you guys know what the word bleak means?
Bad.
Blank.
Bleak, B-L-E-A-K. It means really just not a good outlook. If you say things are looking bleak, that means it's very depressing. It's not a very good outlook. There's nowhere for him to go. So at this point, again, how is Eb feeling? What are some emotions you think Eb is having right now? Johnny?
Sad. He's feeling
Sad.
sorry for himself.
Right? Sorry for himself. Sad. What else might there be?
Self-hate a little bit.
A little bit of self-hate. Yeah, there seems to be a little self-loathing going on. It's very insightful. What else? How would you be feeling?
Terrible.
Terrible. Yeah.
I'd feel probably have probably a lot of
Louder.
anxiety. I'd probably have a lot of anxiety.
Anxiety. Anxious. Yeah, for sure. What am I going to do now? I don't know what to do. Hope?
Angry at himself.
Angry. Yeah, angry at himself, angry at the government for this stupid war, angry. Yeah, there might be some anger. Yeah, for sure.
Are you so eager?
Yeah, a lot. Is it possible to have two emotions inside that are kind of conflicting?
Yeah.
Can you be angry at yourself and somebody else at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. And sometimes that's hard though. When you've got like a lot of emotions going, it's really hard to think clearly for sure. I want to point out something that Jethro does here. I want you to look on page 50, about halfway down the first column. Jethro sat for a while, trying to think of some way out of the situation. It appeared more hopeless the more he thought. He was frightened for the despairing man in front of him, for himself and his family. When he finally spoke, he tried hard to sound reassuring, but the pounding of his heart made his voice shake. Well, you stay here till we can think of something. Eb, I'm going to get you some quilts and things from Nancy's place. I'll bring you what grub I can lay hands on. I can always get eggs and a chicken for you. I think you best eat all you can and rest for a spell. We'll think of what's to be done once you get a little stronger.
Why don't they just have him get a little stronger and then go back to the deserter camps?
Well, that's a possibility, right? So, what is Jethro doing here?
Trying to take care of him
Trying to take care of him.
in secret.
It's really, it's kind of interesting because he's not just taking care of his physical needs, right? Because he's taking care of his physical needs when he says, I'm going to bring you some quilts and some food. But he's also taking care of his spiritual and emotional needs. By telling him, kind of being reassuring, we'll figure it out, okay? You get stronger, we'll figure something out. Eb looked up then. You all but fool me into believing that something can be done, Jeff, but I know better. You know no one else can help me now, not even old Abe himself. Who's old Abe?
It's
Hope?
Abraham Lincoln?
Abraham Lincoln. Says not even Abraham Lincoln can help me now. And we're going to stop there because that's where things turn. When Eb says not even old Abe can help me, it puts an idea into Jethro's head. So we're going to stop there and we'll continue our discussion tomorrow. You may put your things away and get ready for history.
I know what happens. Well, of course.